Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about what is the best sword. So what is the best sword? Well, it's obviously a sword that's made out of an alloy that looks and feels like steel, but is incredibly durable, impossible to break, holds an edge incredibly well and is incredibly hard, but is also really easy to sharpen, and has the perfect length and balance, and is obviously made by a mastersmith about 150 years in the future. So it's not a very helpful answer because it's not a very helpful question. What is the best sword is not really a very good question because it's a very subjective thing. So the question really is, what is the best sword for you? And if you're asking this question, you're probably quite new to swordsmanship at some stage. And it's good to address what stage you're at. So if you're new to swordsmanship in general, you've never touched a sword in your life and you want to learn swordsmanship, I highly recommend you get a blunt training sword. For example, if you're into the Asiatic martial arts, then something like this bokken here. It's made of wood, completely blunt. You can't really hurt yourself that badly with it unless you're trying to hit someone with it. So you can learn the forms, and it's also a little bit lighter than a real sword. So you can build up some strength and condition yourself so that when you do go to a real sword, you don't get any injuries from just the weight of it alone. And also you make sure that you have the correct form when you train. Now, if you're into Western martial arts and you're not so interested in Asian martial arts, then you might consider getting a synthetic sparring sword. So this one is a katana version of one, but you can get longsword versions of them which achieve the same purpose. Similar length and weighting to a real sword, but they're blunt, so you can't hurt yourself. And you can make sure that you develop your form correctly before you go to a proper steel sword, which could be quite dangerous. Now, if you're practicing a specific form of swordsmanship, it might be good to get the tools that they use. For example, in Iaito, they use Iaito. So these look and feel like real swords, but they're completely blunt, so that you can't hurt yourself while you're training. Now, let's say that you're past that stage. You know how to do sword forms, you've been training with a blunt sword for quite some time, and now you want to buy your first sharp sword to do some actual cutting. Well, in that case, then it's really easy to say, oh, I want a clay-tempered sword that's 1095 and I want to cut through rocks. It doesn't quite work that way. I highly recommend you get a lower carbon steel sword that's properly heat treated and it's cheap. The reason being, it's your first sword. You've got to do some trial and error before you know what you like, so you'd rather have it cheap than more expensive because you're probably not going to stop there. It's probably not going to be your only sword. And the other reason why I say to go for a lower carbon sword is because you're less likely to break it. Because if you hit something wrong or you do a wrong cut, a high carbon sword can chip or the edge can roll and get deformed and you can get cracks in the sword because it's a higher carbon sword. Whereas a lower carbon sword is more likely to bend, and if it's properly heat treated, you can probably just bend it back. The other reason why a lower carbon sword is really good is because you can learn to sharpen it well and it's not too hard to sharpen. And so in that way, then you can train your sharpening skills as well as your swordsmanship skills. And after you're done with that cheap 1060, 1045 blade, then you can think about it and say, what did I like about this and what didn't I like about this? And that should dictate what the next sword to buy is. Now, if you're a veteran swords buyer, you've got a good collection of swords and you're asking, what is the best sword for you? I think if you think about it really hard about what you like about your swords and what you dislike about them, you can probably come up with a good idea of what the best next sword for you is. And if you're like me and you've got money that needs to go to other places, then the next best sword is probably the swords that you already own. So I hope you liked that, and with that, I'll see you next time.